Why, hello, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the podcast. This is your host, Justin Jackson, and I'd like to take a minute to give you all a message. It would be really appreciated by the crew of the Theory Podcast if you all checked out our Instagram at Theory Podcast Theory _ podcast. Sorry, I screwed up. But there we update the audience on what happens with the podcast behind the scenes, and we also get the listeners' opinions on what will happen in the next one. So if you want to partake in affecting what might happen in the next podcast, please check out our Instagram. We also post pretty unique content on there. We are also quite active. Also, we have a YouTube channel. If you're not aware, our YouTube channel is Theory Podcast Official. On our YouTube channel, we upload the podcast, kind of no dirt, but the difference is it's a lot more immersive because you get to see what's actually happening while we're recording, and you get to see the images that we see. We put a lot more effort into the YouTube video because the YouTube video, you can see what's happening, so we have to do a video and audio editing. So please take time to subscribe and turn on post notifications on the YouTube channel, and follow and put on post notifications on the Instagram. Both would be very appreciated. You can listen to Theory Podcast on Anchor, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, and most importantly, Spotify. And anyways, let's get into the episode. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is your host, Justin Jackson. Today, I'm bringing you 5 stories you've never heard and you'll never forget. Our first story comes to us from user Haunting Department 83 on Reddit. The story is titled The Thing in the Road. It's taken me a few times to be able to get this down, only because manipulating Reddit is somewhat beyond me, but I'll persist because this is the first time the story will ever be told. A preface comes first. I read from a young age about the paranormal. Was what I usually went for. I may have been intrigued, but skepticism was healthy because I really never experienced anything I couldn't possibly debunk. People talking about all over the world made me think there must be something to it. In my early 30s, my cousin and I and some friends became amateur ghost hunters. Cheap fun, but yeah, we did catch some things on camera that went to the area of something above the normal. But nothing very definitive, until one night I'm driving home about 4:15 in the morning through a mountainous valley area outside of New Haven, Connecticut. It was a state route, and on one side of the mountain it had been blasted through for the road, making a rock wall. On the other side was a ravine and a cable guardrail. Sober and awake, close to home, I then see movement coming from the rock wall and brush at the bottom of it, start to walk onto the road. I immediately know it's got to be a deer. A lot of deer around our area, so I slow down and I'm about to hit the horn, which always works to scare them off, instead of catching them in the lights. I pull my foot off the gas, car's slowing down. I get very confused because it never resolves into being a deer or taking the shape of a deer, just a charcoal gray swirl. And the outline of it was charcoal gray and like static from an old TV tube. Its center was black as ink, no shapes or arms or legs, no head, just an upright form. I wasn't afraid or felt any fear. I was just perplexed. This car is still slowing down. Then eyes turn up and towards me, silvery white and long. The only distinction I can honestly say I saw was that they seemed to get wider as if I caught it unawares. But in the briefest moment, it slipped over the rail and was gone down the ravine. I glanced that way, then I just put the pedal down and went home. What's the strangest part of it, I think, spooky as it was, I should have been telling everybody about it. That was almost 20 years ago now, in another state from where I live now. But I told no one. Till now, and going on YouTube hearing about Wendy's and Native American witches, all of a sudden the memory comes back and nothing about it for so long. Don't believe me? You'd have to see it as I did. This is for the people that may have seen something like that. I don't believe in the things that they talk about in creepypastas, but I definitely have a notion of what I saw that night. Our second story tonight comes from at 4door350z on Instagram. They title their story, Some Sort of Evil Creature Chased Me in My Car. So tonight I wanted to go out because I wanted to practice my Touché and my 93 Miata. I went out to my new favorite spot local to me. I was driving up the mountain, taking it easy, enjoying the views. When I reached the top, I parked in this designated stop/view area, took some videos and pictures of my car and the surrounding woods. While I was doing this, I started to get the feeling that I was being watched from the surrounding wilderness. I wasn't surprised, and I expected this as it's the middle of the night, and there were more than likely predators out at night, curious to see what the ruckus was. Then it got very intense suddenly, like ominously intense. So I started to wrap up what I was doing. I was going to move locations to get a nice view of the stars, to just enjoy the scenery. I then had this overwhelming sense of fear wash over me out of nowhere. So I grabbed my speaker that was playing music but under 25% volume as to not disturb the local wildlife that wanted to sleep. Hopped in my car, rolled up the handcrank for both windows, reattached my steering wheel, and put it into reverse, stalled it, and took off. If you know anything about cars, you know Miatas are great in canyons because of how light and nimble they are. Although being underpowered, I also pride myself in being a good driver, knowing my cars and my limits. Keep this in mind. When I started driving, I lost that urgent sense of fear, so I slowed down when I reached the store at the top where I parked just to get my bearings. I felt the soft feeling of being watched again. That was it, so I started editing the photos and videos. Then again, I got hit with the overwhelming urge to run as much as I can. So I started driving again, and I have this overwhelming sense of dread, fear, and urgency. At this point, I'm hauling ass at the top of third gear. I again lose the overwhelming senses, and it's just lingering at this point, so I back off the throttle and put it into fifth gear, and proceed to try to calm down. Unsurprisingly, it hits me at full force again, so I drop a gear and attempt to disappear. I am double laning, taking the apex, understeering, and oversteering, but the feeling keeps getting more intense as time goes on, and on this one straightaway, it feels like something is about to reach out and grab me from behind. At the next corner, I hit the brakes and turn in, and I swear I saw the reflection of two eyes in my mirrors, and some long, tall thing less than 2 car lengths behind me. Seeing this, I hit the throttle, kicking the back of my car out and almost losing control, but I reel it back in. At this point, I'm driving with little to no self-preservation. I'm getting so close to the inside of each turn I slide because of the dirt, and I'm kicking up clouds behind me. I lose it on a long sweeping turn where I hit my top speed, but following that is a series of low speed corners where it catches right back up to me. I feel a sense of loss almost overpower me, but I just push the gas in more and keep trying to run. On the way down, I pass some sort of Mercedes SUV going up the hill on a straightaway. I see the headlights suddenly disappear right before the next corner. We were both on a straightaway. All the feelings I had up to that point suddenly became non-existent, but I keep pushing hard. About 30 seconds later, they all came back full tilt, and I just kept going. About a minute later, I see the thing in my mirrors again. I kept driving hard, gaining and losing ground for the next 5 minutes or so. I passed some sort of pickup truck. As before, I lost those intense feelings. I made a right at the stop sign and rode about all the gears. The intense feelings came back when I hit fourth gear. I passed the gas station when I was driving, but I didn't stop because it was so close to the area still. But when I entered the lights that came onto the street, everything felt like it would be okay. But less than a second later, when I left those lights, the intense feelings hit me again. Although I was going so fast, I believe I was outrunning it. There was one spot in my mind that I was running towards because there was a lot of people in that area, so I figured that would be the most safe. As I drove faster and got further, the feeling got much less intense. With their approach civilization, I pulled over in the spot I decided was a safe zone. So there I stopped and shut the car off to let it cool off, and all I could smell was the brakes and tires from running so hard. I hit up a few of my buddies who are local to the area, and they said they're not surprised that I saw something that might have been something like a SW, because there's a Native American tribe less than 10 miles as the crow flies away from the spot. I'm a mildly superstitious person, so I know some native folklore or of stuff like this, but I don't believe SWs are in this area. From what I know, Wendy's are mainly exclusive to the East Coast. But from a quick Google image search, it looked most related to a Wendy. He was bipedal, but could switch to 4 legs, was pure white with orange red eyes, and could run upwards of 60 miles per hour. I did a quick search earlier and haven't found anything of the sorts being reported, but then again, I am not very knowledgeable in this area. This was the most terrified I've ever been in my entire life, hands down. I do not have any history of mental illness. This area is in Southern California near Escondido. The mountain is practically surrounded by Native American tribes. I was at the top near 12:30 a.m. I made this post to mainly document what happened to me in case this happens to someone else or whatever. but if you can help identify this thing, I would appreciate it. Okay, our third story tonight comes from user Ocean Girl on Reddit. Her story is titled "The Massive Creature on My Roof, My Encounter." Hey folks, it took me some time, but I think I'm finally ready to share my encounter with you now. It happened in Western Germany, and what I'm about to share is the genuine truth. It all started with this horrible animal screaming sound outside my house at night, which I already compared to all the wildlife animal sound records from zoology institutes, but nothing comes close to it. It sounded like a woman screaming in agony, but then again, even worse. It felt like I could feel the sounds vibrating in my veins. It's hard to describe. It was really scary. I live in a tiny house next to the forest and mountains. It was a dark October night, and I laid in my bed, which is in a sleeping corner. Right in front is a window, which is always half opened, and above me is just a flat roof, guarded all around the house. At first, I heard one animal/creature scream, but then there seemed to be two of them. They sounded very close and wouldn't stop screaming for minutes. The next thing I heard was something heavy running through the garden under my bed window. Followed by heavy branches breaking at the height of my level, which is the second floor. I also heard a loud rush of air/wind combined to that. In the next second, this animal/creature jumped on my roof. So in that moment, it was right above me, which is about 2 to 3 meters. And that was the moment when things started to get messy and very confusing to me till this day. First, I want to point out that this animal/creature sounded so heavy. When it landed, I don't know what animal species that big around here. It sounded massive and therefore surreal. Also, the quickness of its movements seemed surreal. After that jump, it started to run on my roof from one side to the other. It first sounded like it was something extremely heavy on 2 legs, but suddenly that changed to what sounded like something extremely heavy on 4 paws. I remember sitting straight up in bed under it, with an intense pulse and my mind just trying to process what I'm hearing, what kind of creature that is. That was also the turning point when I seriously felt threatened. Since I'm a girl living alone in a tiny house and didn't have any protection to fight something massive like this, just knives or pepper spray, which I'm quite sure wouldn't have been helpful. So I decided to do something stupid, I guess. I thought maybe I could shock it/scare it away. So I hit against my bed window with my flat hand as hard and loud as I could. What happened next messes with me until this day. Not even 1 second passed after I hit the glass when this creature hit it right back from outside. So it must have been sitting right above me in that moment and reached down to my window, and it reacted so quickly it was surreal. The sound of what touched my window glass sounded like a mix between big claws and feathers. This reaction, the way it sounded to me, put me in kind of a shock, I guess. I realized I'm quite screwed in that moment, because whatever it was very intelligent, huge, and wouldn't back off. That's how it felt to me, as if it would say, "You have no power here, always one step further, know your lane." Basically, I just froze then, on my bed, my back to the wall, and all I could do was stare at where it hit the window glass. I was too scared to close it. I was too scared to breathe even. Then it suddenly just left my roof, which sounded again like a massive weight would jump off in the air. I never shared this encounter before, because I felt pretty alone with it, until last night when I went on Reddit to look for someone from Germany who experienced something similar, and I was lucky. His post was 24 days ago. He and his hunting buddy heard the same screaming sounds from a cow's field. Then they were chased for a short time by something they couldn't see. Reading about his encounter made me want to step forward with mine as well. Since there are quite some confusing aspects/details to my encounter, it's a bit hard to find someone with a similar experience. So I genuinely hope that this post reaches someone who can relate and who'd be open to share his/her experience as well. If you'd like to know more about my encounter, please feel free to ask everything you like, of course. Now, we are going to be moving on to our 4th story by an anonymous user on Reddit. I'm a 21-year-old female. I'll start this off by saying this is not my first experience with the supernatural. I have seen what looked like an alien before during sleep paralysis 2 other times prior to this experience. This was by far the scariest. The story is titled, "I've seen a gray during sleep paralysis and I'm terrified." So I stayed up until about 8 a.m. and fell asleep on the couch watching TV, and woke up when my husband came home on his lunch break. We hung out for a half hour, and once again I fell asleep on the couch. For about an hour or 2 after I fell asleep, I woke up to my body being completely paralyzed, pins and needles all over my body. I couldn't talk either. My dog was behind the arm of the couch messing around with my cat, and the couch is up against the banister that leads down to the basement. I gazed up a couple
Storybox
inches,
Audio.
and I shit you not, there was a gray alien with a giant almond black eyes just staring at me. I started freaking out, and I tried to call for my dog to come up on the couch with me, but I couldn't. I couldn't do a freaking thing. I could see the texture of this thing's skin, and I seen it blink as well.
Storybox
My
Audio.
vision started to disappear, but I could still see it a little bit. It started to walk into my living room, but as it walked, it started to take the form of my husband. He even had what looked like his sunglasses on, but a little bit bigger. My husband said, "Don't worry, it's fine. I'll be right back." He walked
Storybox
towards our
Audio.
bedroom and disappeared. I generally thought my husband came home early. He didn't. I woke up screaming and started having a panic attack. I don't know what to think of this situation. I got so scared I spent most of my day outside in the 100-degree weather, sweating my ass off because I didn't want to be inside.
Storybox
I'm not sure if
Audio.
this was just a very intense sleep paralysis or what. What do you guys think? I'm still terrified. Also, this was around 1:30 p.m. and it was very light in my living room. I am not on drugs for the people who are asking. I drink very occasionally and I live on a military base, so I will literally get arrested if I get caught with anything. Now we are moving on to our last and final story of the evening. This story is by user Christian_Regal on Reddit. The story is titled, "What Did I See?" When I was about 9, my grandparents lived about 10 miles away from a small town in Indiana. They lived in the middle of 2 cow pastures and were about 3 miles away from the closest neighbor's house. The cow pasture regularly had cows in them, and they would regularly come towards my grandparents' house because a creek separated the 2 properties. The cows being there and the fact we lived out in the country, coyotes would often be on our property and try to feed on some of the cows as predators do. But I don't think I saw a coyote. One day while I was at their house, I was sitting in an apple tree, relaxing and eating apples. I fell asleep around 8 p.m. and woke up around 11 or 12. I looked around and found it surprising I was still in the tree, but I heard something. I heard breathing that wasn't my own. I looked around the tree and didn't see anything. I even checked higher up on the tree, and then I looked below me. On the ground about 5 feet away from the tree was a coyote sitting, staring at me. It looked huge, bigger than any coyote I've ever seen in my entire life. It almost looked like a wolf, but we don't have wolves in Indiana. Its eyes looked strange. They were a dark orange, almost red, and they looked like they were glowing, like when a cat's eyes were reflecting light, but I could see its pupils. After about 1 minute of me and this coyote staring at each other, it opened its mouth, and I swear to God it had human teeth. Soon after it opened its mouth, and I got a look at its teeth, it spoke in a deep male smoker's voice. "Better get it back inside, boy." And then it turned around and walked off. When it reached the tree line that was by the creek, I thought it stood up, and it looked like it picked something up. I soon wasn't able to see it anymore, so I jumped down and full sprinted to my grandparents' house. They were all asleep, and so I ran to my room and dove into my bed. The next day, I woke up and my grandparents were talking together, saying that the neighbor had called and said that one of his cows had died. It had looked like it had been dragged to the creek, but nothing was there other than blood. I didn't say anything, I just sat there horrified. Had that thing really killed a cow, or was it just a normal pack of coyotes? I later started seeing it regularly. It would always be sitting like a dog just in front of the tree line, then it would slowly disappear into it. About once a month, I would hear someone say something weird had happened in the woods. On the same day, I would see the coyote. When I turned 14, my grandpa took me on my first hunting trip. But before we left, I saw it standing this time still by the tree line. My grandpa didn't see it, and when I rubbed my eyes, it was gone, so I still didn't say anything. We got to where the spot was. We sat there for about an hour. We didn't see anything up until then we saw that thing. This was the first time I saw it clearly. It was huge, about the size of a large gray wolf. But it looked wrong. It looked extremely skinny and was bleeding. Some of its skin was missing and I could see the muscle. I think my grandpa saw it too because he was shaking like a leaf. Then something happened. A branch fell off a tree about 12 feet in front of me. It caused me to look up. Then I was horrified. I've never been so scared in my entire life. Still haven't. There was half a cow in the tree about 30 feet off the ground. Me and my grandpa ran as fast as we could back to the house. And when we made it, I looked towards the tree line, and there it was, sitting there, staring at me. They later moved that year, and I've tried researching it, but the only thing I've found that somewhat resembles it is an SW, but I don't think you can find them in Indiana. If you have any thought, please comment them. Edit. I learned that about 5 months ago, the farmer was found torn to shreds in his home, and that most of his livestock was killed leading up to his death. And that concludes our 5 true stories that you've never heard and you'll never forget. Roll the outro. Well, if you're hearing this means that you made it to the end of the episode, and I would like to say thank you for reaching it to the end of the episode. I hope you enjoyed the episode that you listened to. We really would appreciate it if you checked out the YouTube channel at Theory Podcast Official or the Instagram at Theory_podcast. Follow both and turn on post notifications on both so you're alerted whenever we make a new post or upload something new. Also, check us out on Spotify, Radio Shack, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and other things such as Anchor. Also, if you want to have a chance to be in the podcast yourself, leave a voice message in Anchor or DM us on Instagram so that if you have a special story, you can tell it. Oh yeah, if you have a story that you'd like to share involving Bigfoot, ghosts, aliens, anything paranormal of that such, tell us on Instagram, and we'll gladly have you on the podcast. You just gotta, text us first, yeah. But yes, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.